Conshohocken Borough Council duly open and ready to conduct any business that may come before it. Prior to the work session, Borough Council held a special public budget meeting at 6 p.m. to present the 2024 fiscal year budget. First item on the agenda is under Land Use Matters, Public Hearings, and Ordinances. The first item is a discussion of the final draft of the Main Street Overlay District Ordinance. Ms. Judy Stern-Goldstein from Gilmore & Associates is here to present this evening, so thank you, Judy. The floor is yours.
Thank you. On behalf of my staff and the task force, we're all happy to be able to present this to you. And I'm going to just feed off of your manager's ending statement. Conshohocken is a great place to live, work, play, and grow. And this ordinance will help you do all four. Keep the live, work, play, and the grow and play to it. Oh, I'm sorry. Get rid of that. So we were tasked with coming up or preparing an overlay ordinance for your essentially the Main Street corridor along Fayette. This came as one of the implementation action items from the comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2018. And we had the honor to work with the borough on that comprehensive plan, so we've been very familiar with it. We did hold a public workshop on May 2nd of last year, and then a task force was compiled by the borough, and we met with the task force several times to complete the draft ordinance you have in front of you. The items that the action plan called for from the comprehensive plan that are dealt with in this ordinance: updating ordinance to support infill development and redevelopment efforts, revising local codes to encourage appropriate and flexible design options, key on the word flexible there, updating ordinances to encourage dwelling units in combination with businesses as mixed-use development, again, key on mixed use, providing incentives for the adaptive reuse of vacant, abandoned, or underutilized commercial properties, improving the permitting process to help facilitate the development of new stores, restaurants, etc., updating parking policies to ensure requirements are conducive to businesses and residents, and updating ordinances to encourage a mix of land uses, again, key on that mix, densities and site plans that support alternative modes of transportation. So out of the information that we gleaned from the public meeting and in the multitude of meetings we had with the task force and our knowledge of the borough through working with you on the comprehensive plan, we've come up with this proposed ordinance. What it does, it creates an overlay, and that overlay is an added option on top of the underlying zoning. So if Joe, property owner, owns a parcel, he can develop that parcel and use it per the existing underlying ordinance, or he could opt into the overlay and then develop it in a mixed use with more flexibility, but with that comes additional standards. So the Declaration of Legislative Intent, which is the beginning, has just 6 items, really, like bullet points. Encourage economic development and redevelopment of underutilized parcels. That is the core of this. Assist in unifying Fayette Street as an attractive, vibrant, mixed-use corridor. Promote pedestrian orientation of streets and buildings. Use scale, building orientation, and landscaping to establish community identity. To incentivize lot assembly, gathering lots together as one, and consolidation toward the more efficient and cost-effective use of land, and simplify and streamline the approval process. So analysis of the existing ordinance, a lot of things are permitted only by conditional use, which is an additional regulatory process and a hearing that applicants would need to go through, which costs time and money, both borough and applicant, and could be a hindrance to the adaptive reuse and redevelopment of certain parcels, especially one parcel here and there. It adds a lot of time and expense, and when someone's looking at a parcel, there's no guarantee that that use is permitted if they have to go through the conditional use first. The other thing is, right now, the parts of Fayette Street that make it really special are the little nooks and crannies and spaces and sort of the mixed, the nooks and crannies and spaces and the little parcels of mixed use that really sort of evolved over the years. Unfortunately, much of that isn't permitted under your existing underlying zoning. So this ordinance permits that adaptive reuse, and it starts with a chart of uses that would be permitted. In order to do a mixed use, it would be a residential and a non-residential. Non-residential are only permitted on the upper floors, residential are only permitted on the upper floors, non-residential must be on the bottom floor. And we look at this in 3 zones. Zone 1 are the lower avenues, basically Elm to 4th. 4th through 9th are the mid, and then 9th through 12th are the upper, which would be Zone 3. 3 different characters. The character down in the lower end is more the multifamily, the apartment, the office. Mid is more the entertainment area, restaurants and bars, and the upper has more of a residential feel. And in meeting with the task force, I have to say that it had pretty good representation throughout the corridor, and that preservation of the residential feel of the upper avenues was an item that the task force kept coming back to. There were some heated discussions and debates because to encourage more development would potentially have a negative impact on the residential uses that want to remain there. So there was a balance struck. The chart goes through all of the different uses and says which uses are permitted in which district. And then there are some general regulations that would deal with the corridor in general. As I said, all non-residential uses have to be on the ground floor. Residential cannot be. Any non-residential uses in Zone 3, which are the upper avenues, shall cease operation by 10 p.m. And that was conscious so that we don't have bars and restaurants open all night and doing their recycling at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, where people are more in a residential area. We added in the daycare facility for both children and adults as a permitted use in the overlay. Right now, it's only permitted as conditional use in your ordinance, so we included those regulations in this district because it would not be a conditional use, it would be part of this.
Judy, I'm sorry, which district is that in?
That would be in this overlay district.
But not, the whole overlay,
Zone.
not.
Oh,
which
I'm
zone?
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Daycare is only permitted in Zone 1
Okay.
of the overlay.
Thank you, that's what
Sorry
I
about
was
that.
trying to get to.
Yes. Took me a minute to follow, but I got there.
We got it.
A requirement for civic or public place is in here if the non-residential space being developed is greater than 15,000 square feet. So for the smaller developments of non-residential, there's no requirement for civic or public plaza. For the 15,000 and greater, there is a requirement. General requirements, blank walls facing Fayette are prohibited.
Yes.
We took a page from your existing ordinances and have very similar language to what you have already.
Thank you, Tina.
Street-facing buildings should exhibit variation in roofs, so we don't want just plain block, like a whole block the same height. They need to break up the horizontal form and contain architectural elements like gables, dormers, and cornices, and or other architectural treatments to add detail and interest to the building facade that face streets.
So Judy, that is written out in the overlay.
Yes, I just quoted from the overlay.
Thank you.
Yes, and the next sentence, flat roofs shall not be permitted in Zone 2 on buildings that are 4 stories. So in Zone 2, you go up to 4 stories, 45 feet or 4 stories, but you can't have a flat roof.
Right.
So you can't just have one giant monolithic structure.
That's great.
Buildings and major pedestrian entrances, in other words, the main door to the buildings, shall be oriented towards the primary street frontage and public plazas. So you can't have a big blank wall facing Fayette and then the entrance on the side. Everything is meant to be facing Fayette because we want feet on the street. We want this to be an active, vibrant area. The front yard is measured from the curb line of the public street That was probably hours of debate and discussion
And drawing
and drawing on the wall. Yes. I'll give you the reason behind this. It's simple yet complicated. Usually, front yard is measured from the right-of-way line. The right-of-way line is hard to determine. You can't tell just by looking at the street, and it can vary. There's a minimum PennDOT right-of-way. Sometimes there's right-of-way that's been offered for dedication. Other times there isn't. So by going from the curb line, it's something that you can physically see, and it's relevant to what's happening.
Okay.
That was a long discussion, though.
And what was the result of that? What's this?
It's measured from, the front yard is measured from the curb line, and the front yard is 25 feet in zone 2 and 3, and in zone 1, it's the underlying district. So it's 25 feet from the curb line. If it was 25 feet from the right-of-way, it might be 30 or 40 feet from the curb line, if that makes sense. A side yard is not required along the side of a building that shares a party wall. Seems obvious, but it needs to be spelled out. This is an interesting one. A minimum unobstructed sidewalk width of 5 feet is required. So one of the things that we like best, and I believe the committee liked best about Fayette, is the little nooks and crannies. And, there's little pockets of seating, but they're off the sidewalk. So no matter what, you need to have a 5-foot unobstructed sidewalk. It doesn't mean that your sidewalk's only 5 feet wide. Your sidewalk might come back 10, 12 feet from the street. There might be room for a street tree. There might be some seating next to the building or a little patio with chairs next to the building. But you need a minimum of 5 feet of unobstructed. That comes up later in the county's review.
Judy, just out of curiosity, what are the widths of the sidewalks in Zone 3?
In Zone 3,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a minimum. I know from walking up there, some places that might only be 5 feet unobstructed, other places you might have an 8-foot wide.
Okay.
But it always
It has to be a minimum
has
of
to be a minimum
5.
of 5 feet unobstructed, which really lines up with
Yeah, okay,
like ADA and, strollers passing each other, things like that too.
okay.
Street trees, this ordinance, the draft has street trees at an interval no less than 40 feet. The county wants to take that to 30 feet. I'm a landscape architect, so I love trees, but I also know that trees have been the bane of existence of many a property owner and business owner in Conshohocken. And I'm not fond of seeing trees cut down, so I'd rather make it reasonable where we can. That's something that for council to decide later, but that was the rationale.
Right.
And then we have sign regulations too. So there's a freestanding sign for the whole mixed use, and then each tenant also gets a sign. And that's included in this ordinance, so that we don't have tenants going to the zoning hearing board to get an individual sign for them.
Okay.
Just, Judy, just back to the trees, there was a lot of discussion from the business owners about the cost that is incurred on them by basically putting in the ordinance that we have to have these trees, and then when the trees, trees only have a certain life expectancy, and people forget that. They don't live forever,
Right.
and the businesses feel that that's a huge cost then that they have to incur. So there was a lot of discussion around that.
Yeah, there is, and trees also do need upkeep, and they do drop things like leaves or sometimes fruit if it's the wrong ones planted. And if you don't plant the right tree, it might lift up the sidewalk, which then adds another expense to the business or property owner also. So the right tree in the right place at the right interval.
And they don't want it
Can
to
help.
obstruct the view of their building either, of their business.
Right, which is why
Right,
you're not going to plant a tree that's the most dense with a huge leaf
correct.
that drops all kinds of stuff right in front of your business.
Right.
Or you're also not going to plant a ginkgo tree that's female and drops those terrible smelling berries in front of your business either.
It was interesting what generated the most discussions in this. You would have thought that there would be more about what types of businesses, and there would be a lot of generation. Most of it was spent around some of these odd and curious things, but I think it was time well invested in hearing everybody's kind of piece of it. And the most important person there, I think, was our zoning officer, who did an absolute great job, because she would pull up the zoning ordinance and we'd have a robust discussion about, does it meet what the intention that we're trying to get to, and the measurements, we changed those multiple times on different
We
areas.
tested the impervious again.
Yeah.
The little whiteboard was one of our biggest friends.
So it really was a lot of dialogue, and I will give this committee, this task force that we put together, they worked hard on making sure that decisions that we were making to present to council really made sense for the community. So I give them kudos for the work that they did and the work that Judy led.
It was a really good, hardworking committee, and I have to say that it was the type of committee that brought their stuff home with them, thought about it, and sometimes came back the next month to reopen an item that had already been determined because they had something new to add to the discussion.
So I think you all did a good job picking who the representatives were, because they took their job seriously and wanted it to be right for the community.
There's just a couple more requirements.
Sorry,
I'll zip through
I
them
just
for
wanted
you.
to add that.
Parking, the non-residential parking is 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet, which seems to be appropriate. It's not going to be overparked, but it will have parking that's needed. Residential is 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit.
Judy,
I'm sorry.
1 second. When you say parking, you're talking about parking right on Fayette Street,
No, this is off-street parking.
off-street.
Off-street. Oh, I'm so sorry. Usually I'm loud. I don't know why it's not picking up.
So, okay.
I'll
So you're
talk
saying
more toward that.
off- For off-street parking, and then what did you say after?
Off-street parking is 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet of non-residential use.
Okay.
Just to put that into perspective, in the typical municipality that doesn't have on-street parking, it's 5 or 5.5 per thousand for retail and office and things like that. So taking it to 3 recognizes that there is on-street parking available.
Okay.
And in the lower avenues, there's the parking garage also, which really helps.
Right. Right, thank you.
There's also an option for if the required off-street spaces are located elsewhere than on the same lot, they can be authorized as a conditional use by Borough Council. So if somebody wants to allocate spaces somewhere else and not put a lot of parking on their lot, that is also in the ordinance, similar to a requirement you have in your ordinance already. Ingress and egress to the parking has to be from side streets or alleys. We don't want all the curb cuts on Fayette. Parking has to be to the side or rear of buildings. You can't put parking in the front yard. We don't want to see buildings set back far from the street with parking in front, so that's not permitted. Parking areas have to have a pedestrian walkway, connection to the sidewalk system and the building. Parking has to be, if there's a structure, it has to be designed and scaled to be compatible with adjacent buildings. And then we added a couple definitions because we needed to create the definition for mixed use, which is included. And then 2 new types of uses were included, a farmer's market and a grocer's market, because there was some hue and cry for something like that in the middle and upper avenues. So we included those definitions too, and that a farmer's market, for instance, cannot exceed 13,000 square feet in size. So to keep it to the smaller type grocery store, it's not going to be a large Acme, ShopRite, or anything like that.
So when you're speaking about that, are you discussing zone 3?
The farmer's market, and
It's just 3.
it is just 3. I'm just making sure. Yes, just 3.
Okay.
I didn't want to misspeak, but yes, it's just 3, which is the upper avenues. So that, in a nutshell, is the ordinance. I'm sure you've all seen, your planning commission did review this in October and did have a few recommendations. I'm just going to summarize them. You have it in front of you, I'm sure, but They agreed with Montgomery County Planning Commission, they would like to see a 30-foot interval for the street trees. They wanted to see the daycare in all 3 zones. And they wanted to see the microbrewery permitted in Zone 1. I believe they were the ones I jotted. Did I miss any of those?
This was microbrewery, winery, or distillery in Zone 1.
Okay.
Governance, yes.
Okay. And then the Montgomery County Planning Commission did a review also, and I have to say that they brought up some good points, and if the objective of this ordinance was to be more restrictive and be very strict on your design standards, then I would say that their recommendations would be very applicable. Unfortunately, the goal is expressed to us and in discussions with the committee and throughout the entire committee task force meetings was that we wanted this to be flexible enough to encourage people to come in and do an adaptive reuse. And the intent of this overlay was to simplify things and make it more enticing for someone to come in and address some of the underutilized or vacant buildings and lots along Fayette to keep them vibrant and active. So the intent here was to be more promoting of that and less restrictive, and then also get people in to start working with the borough. The borough staff and officials have been very good at expressing the needs and desires of the borough with
Right.
developers and getting a win-win.
So Judy, so people are clear on Zone 3. Those buildings are protected historically, the homes.
As per your ordinance already, yes. This
Correct.
does not touch any existing regulations.
Correct. So when shops come in that area, they will most likely be very specific also, I believe, according to the way the zones are. The frontage on the, say, home, if it's turning to a business, will be protected in that, correct? Because of the historic part of it.
According to
Did
your
we-
current ordinance, it would be protected to the extent that it currently is already.
Okay, that's just what I wanted to make clear for people.
And then the overlay piece has written in it that we need the architectural gables, roof lines. So
Right.
we've covered both sides of this
Right.
in the underlying ordinance and then the overlay.
Right,
So we have that covered.
right.
That
Okay.
we don't want just square buildings
No.
going in.
And we want the Zone 3 to keep its historical charm while.
Correct. That was
Promoting some
very
business.
clear from the
Yes,
And that's
task
why there's a
force.
difference in height
right,
with
because,
Zone
yep,
3. I was asked by the planning commission, why not go higher off Zone 3? And that was to protect the
Right.
residential character.
Right.
And not create shade and shadow
right,
from a looming building over existing residential dwellings.
okay.
Yeah, Zone 3 is most of the RO district. There's a little bit in Zone 2 of the RO district. Is what, like, we're very concerned about what you mentioned, the comprehensive plan, protect the facades of those buildings, and, you know, that's a big concern, and I'm hearing that that is true, that it will protect the facades of the,
That is protected by your current ordinance, and
Right.
this doesn't touch
and this
that.
won't override that.
This will not override that.
okay.
This will give people that have those properties more options to have additional uses in those buildings if they
Right,
choose to do so.
okay. But those,
And Kathleen, what we may do based on this conversation is actually, we can make it explicit in the overlay that those provisions still apply.
okay, that would,
We could
that
have
would,
something like
that would help, Mike.
Yeah, if you just
I
spell
think that
that
would
out
help.
a little more
Yeah,
clearly.
that will help for
That's easy.
everyone.
That's just
Yeah.
a couple lines.
Because that was part of the goal and the
Yeah.
intent of
No,
this.
it's good for us to know
That, there's nothing wrong with making it crystal clear.
that. Yeah, and Judy, I can tweet that and then I'll send it to you.
That'd be perfect. Thank you.
And Judy also mentioned that in Zone 2, that'll allow buildings to go up to 45 feet. Just out of curiosity, are there any buildings in that zone now that are that tall?
In Zone 2?
Yeah. I can't think of any,
We-
but there
We
might
were
be.
looking out the
We
window
stuck
at
our,
something.
yeah, we looked out the window. There is one,
The intent is to-
I'm looking out the window.
Off
It was
of-
that way. We were looking out.
yeah, off of 8th Avenue that comes just about that height. But that was the discussion around flat top
Right.
and how much usable space versus non-flat top. and then not being able to have that as really
Okay.
that type of space.
Because I
Right,
saw
and
that and I
that's
couldn't
why-
think of anything that was that tall.
Yeah, and you do have a couple churches that,
Yeah.
it's not just the steeple, you have like the towers that come
Right.
up too.
Cupola on the post
Yeah.
office,
Yeah,
which looks beautiful.
and not all of those items count in part of your building height. You can have spires and
Right.
things like that, but the tower portion of the church that, again, we're sitting in the room and looking out the window.
That's funny.
And on Fayette Street, you mentioned that it would be just residential on the first floor and, I'm sorry,
Oh,
opposite, just
right.
residential upstairs and the first floor had to be some. Are there any places on Fayette Street where there's strictly residential? I can only think of 3 houses that are strictly residential on
In the
Fayette Street.
on the upper avenues, there are some that are all residential.
Yeah, I think on those, on the other side of 11th, there's 4 houses. The first one has an office, but the other 3 are strictly residential, and they can maintain that, correct?
Yes, they can, and they're permitted, anything you're permitted to do in the underlying district, you can do.
Right.
These regulations only come in play if somebody wants to do mixed use.
Right.
So if one of those homes wants to turn into office or retail on the first floor, maybe office on the second and retail on the third,
I'm guessing they won't, but just, I
Right,
want to
right.
ask that question, okay.
they could, and if somebody buys up a couple parcels,
And
something could
that
happen
too,
too.
yeah. Okay.
And this doesn't say that, people are knocking on the door to come in and have 5 projects submitted tomorrow, but it gives people the flexibility to start planning ahead.
Okay, cool.
Anyone else with
Judy, you may have answered this already, but just to make it clear for residents, so on the county review, they actually recommended 8-foot sidewalks.
They did, but 8 foot included, you have the verge, which is the grass piece, and then you have 8 feet.
Okay.
We're saying a 5 foot, the ordinance is saying a minimum 5 foot clear space, so from, let's say, from here to there is about 8 feet, but if you have tree in here, and then you still need, this is about 5 feet to here, so you need that much room clear, which still meets the thing. You might have, in order to get that 5 feet, you might have 15 feet from the curb to the building. I'm thinking, when you get to the upper avenues, like Fiend has that little sitting area. So from the curb to the building, they're probably close to 22 feet. Not all of it is sidewalk.
So our goal was to make a space that's like enticing to people to come into. So we're leaving it 5, but sort of knowing that there may be more room for
Well,
pedestrians.
5 is just the clear space.
Okay.
So in order to get everything else you need to get in that area, if you need a street tree,
Yep.
that's going to take up area between the curb and that 5 feet of clear space.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so,
To directly answer Denny, yes, that was the intent. Make
Okay.
it more enticing and provide creative, innovative space in front of businesses that attract and make people want to come.
Yep. Okay. Thank
To
you.
allow the cafe feel, if we wanted that, to allow it to
and the nooks and crannies that kind of evolved along Fayette, that's part of what makes it special.
Absolutely.
So yes. So the goal is to have Conshohocken continue to be a great place to live, work, play, and grow. I'm going to have to steal that, Stephanie. I'll give you credit whenever I use it. Yeah? Okay. Any other questions?
I don't think anybody does, no. Thank you so much, Judy. You've done a great job. You put in a lot of hard work, and I know that Tina is.
Thank you to the whole committee. And just so you know, I won't physically be here on the 15th. Stacy Yoder will be here. I'm having a medical procedure done on the 13th and won't be able to
Okay.
do anything yet.
Well, we will miss you.
I will
But
miss
thank you
you.
for all your hard work and all your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time and for your great committee.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. Don't forget your purse.
Yeah. Might need the keys.
The next item on the agenda is under presentations. It is the Local Climate Action Plan presentation from Tim Beckel and Justin Claffey from the EAC. Thank you for coming in this evening.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good
Nice to
evening.
see you again. So we
wanting to give you an update on a very important EAC initiative. I'm going to kind of give some of the background on it, and Justin will give kind of a high level overview. So LCAP is Local Climate Action Program. And before we get into what that is, I wanted to give kind of everyone a refresher on what Conshohocken has done in terms of climate action. So if many of you remember, most of you, in 2019, the Borough Council of Conshohocken passed the Ready for 100 resolution. Many of you voted for it, setting a goal for renewable energy for 2035, and then basically everything renewable by 2050. So very good goal, and we've taken some steps. I know the Borough, not on this list, the Borough has done things as far as building efficiency. We've talked about the vehicle fleet. I know that's in flux, unfortunately, for some of the realities, economic realities, but the Borough's taken steps that aren't on here. We also have the Mayor's Solar Energy Proclamation, and there's a little bit of a gap there, if you can imagine why. Going back to the Ready for 100 resolution, when we initially passed that before we had to go through the whole COVID thing, that resolution had a method of implementing the goal, which was an energy transition plan and an energy transition task force. That kind of got lost a little bit in the COVID years. And so when coming out of those years, what we said and what we talked with the Borough Administration and Borough Council was, let's see if we can do some specific steps. Let's not try to bite off everything in one go. So in 2022, we had the electric vehicle charging initiative that we presented to you all, and I know we're working on that, continue to work on that. And then this year we had our first Green Fest, bringing a lot of education and businesses that are focused on climate and bringing that information to the residents and their services to the residents. So what we, as we continue with this conversation, we set a goal, right? You all set a goal for our community. And it's in terms of we have a goal. How do we put that into government policy? How do we make progress on that goal? And that's what LCAP is part of, what the EAC is trying to do. So again, LCAP, Local Climate Action Program, it's funded by the DEP. So if going back to the Energy Transition Plan, we were talking about putting out $10,000, $20,000 in borough budget. This is free. It's taking resources from EAC volunteers, and obviously the Borough Administration is putting time into it, but no out-of-pocket dollars. And it's done with the Penn State Sustainability Institute, and working with a professional advisor. And our partner in this program is a graduate student, Calvin Lee. He's in the services, and he's looking for what's his career going to be like when he gets out of the service, and he's looking to do this kind of work, do sustainability work. So that's, and Justin and I meet with him weekly to go through the program, which I'll let Justin talk a little bit more about.
Thank you, Tim. And yes, so you'll see we have these two phases here, the greenhouse gas emission inventory and then the action plan itself. So right now we're in phase one of that greenhouse gas emissions inventory. That's what we're meeting with him about on a weekly basis. So this semester is based on that, and what that is working with the professional advisor, PICO, utility companies, things like that, getting the data of the borough and consolidating that into a readable, digestible piece of information. It's using a software called ICLEI, which we have access to, and we get to see what he's doing. And that's what our meetings are also about, adding input as far as what this inventory could look like. As far as gathering some of the data, it's coming from different sources. He might say, I don't need this, we'll add to it. Maybe you should throw that in there. We're kind of looking at it as a one-time moment that we can put together all this information and really get a baseline for the borough. So that's what's going on at this moment. Phase 2, after he comes back from winter break, will be putting together the actual action plan. So that is taking that information, putting it into, you'll kind of see the little example in the bottom right there, putting it into a readable, digestible document that will have not only that information, but actionable things we can do with it. So whether that's transportation is our biggest emitter, or residents' energy bills are the biggest emitter, things of that nature, this action plan will produce ideas, inputs on how the borough can go about addressing those things. And just FYI, this is just a document. So as Tim said, this is us, Penn State, and others just putting this information together so we can have it moving into the future.
Thank you.
Here's the timeline. So this began in August, working together, goes to the end of this semester for that greenhouse inventory we mentioned, then the spring cohort in January, and then that final cohort will be when we have the action plan all put together at the end of the next semester, and then we will draft work and finalize, and then we plan to come back when that is complete and have another, I won't say final presentation, advisory presentation.
Dialogue, so.
Conversation.
I think, when we looked at this, and EAC has been looking at the LCAP for a number of years and really interested in it, and what I come back to when we talk about the Ready for 100 resolution and the energy transition plan, all of that talked about you need to set a baseline. You don't know, until you know what you're trying to improve, you can't improve. And what gets measured gets improved. So the important thing about this, from my personal perspective, is getting those measurements, because then we can have a conversation. Can't have a conversation without the information.
Makes sense.
So Tim, if I remember Ready for 100, there was a drive for local municipalities to get together to try and build something amongst all of them. And there was not an agreement across all municipalities to participate. Is that what this LCAP is kind of taking the place of, to help organize some of that? And
So-
then you voluntarily look at it or participate in it?
So I was looking back, so the energy, what we were talking about for the energy transition plan was hiring a consultant to do that work for us, and that would have been a major expense, a six-figure expense. And so we were working with other communities in the area. How can we partner together, get almost a joint project to economize basically on budget more than anything? I would say is that's my recollection of it. In some ways, LCAP is broader because it's about climate action. It's not just energy transition. So there's elements of this that would not be in an energy transition plan per se, or there could be. But from the phase 1, the measurement side of things, that would have been the same. And instead of paying a private consultant to do that work on the borough's behalf or the local community, we're getting it as a community for free from DEP with some great help from borough administration.
That's great.
I did want to note something as the liaison to the EAC. One, thank you so much for putting in the additional time each month and each week to continue meeting with for this program. Second, they're kind of going off of what you're talking about. There was this big discussion beforehand to ensure that this would be something that would be applicable for our borough, because there's a big distinction between what the Conshohocken zip code is and what our 1 square mile of borough is. So that is being factored into this assessment, that it's solely focused on our 1 square mile and not the entire like Conshohocken zip code or other municipalities. So
it's just our footprint and what we can do
exactly.
for the world in our 1 square mile footprint.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we could do a lot.
Exactly, and we just talked with Calvin yesterday, and I mean, some of the tools that he has at his fingertips it's really amazing. It's a big question mark for us was transportation data. How are you going to get vehicle miles, Conshohocken?
Right.
And they have a tool where literally you can go into the GIS, the graphical information system, and draw the lines, and you pull out the PennDOT data from PennDOT
That's
about
crazy.
the vehicle mile. It is crazy. I mean, I was hoping there was something like that, and it actually was there.
That's great, yeah. Anybody else have any questions? Well, guys, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard time and the work that you put into the EAC. I know that council, we all appreciate what you're doing and helping keep Conshohocken great.
It's hard work, but it's not hard time. I won't.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your
Thank
Thank you
support.
for the cleanup, too.
Oh, yeah, thanks for the
That's a picture
Yes.
from the cleanup. Last,
Cleanup is
2
always,
weekends
every
ago.
year, it's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Next item on the agenda is council business. The first item is a discussion on a supplemental appropriation to the fiscal year 2023 budget to buy out Keystone Property Group's lease interest in the Borough Hall property. I will turn this over to Ms. Checo.
Thank you, President Leonard. As requested by Borough Council, the Borough Administration has been negotiating in good faith with Keystone Property Group in order to reach an agreement on an amount of funds that would be required to buy out their lease interests in the Borough Hall property. Mr. Gottlieb and Mr. Sokolowski and Mr. Peters have finalized those good faith negotiations with an agreed upon $1,525,000 buyout. So we are going to recommend that you approve the terms of this negotiation and proceed with the closing process. This would, in essence, remove Keystone Property Group, all of their interests in our property upon closing. So something important to factor into your decision-making is that the borough went in front of the Montgomery County Redevelopment Authority a few months ago and requested the utilization of a revolving loan fund to effectuate this buyout in the amount of $1,400,000. So in essence, what we are asking you for in terms of supplemental appropriation is only $125,000 because you'll be utilizing 1.4 of these RLF funds that are sitting at the county. And this property is tied in with the unified development, so it's kind of a perfect closure for all parties involved. And what we need to provide is the executed closing documents to the RDA, and then they will release the funds. But in order for us to get to that closing, we are going to have to ask for a supplemental appropriation by resolution for the full amount.
Right.
And then your capital reserve fund would be reimbursed once the RDA funds were executed and given to the borough. Another important factor to remember or keep in mind as you are considering this matter is that the annual gross revenue for this building right now that Keystone Property Group is collecting, they then take out from those proceeds their current mortgage. The remaining funds are then split 50-50. So the borough is not currently gaining the full benefits from owning this building and having tenants. This buying out their leasing interests would result in approximately $513,000 worth of revenue from this building that would now go directly to the borough. And that's important because if you are utilizing $125,000 of your reserve funds, your return on investment is basically 90 days. It's a no-brainer. It's in the best interest of the borough in both the short term and the long term. We'll work diligently to get us to that closing line as quickly as possible if approved. So there'll be a resolution for the supplemental appropriation request on your November 15th, November 20th agenda, 15th agenda. I'm mixing up November and December. But tonight we are asking council to authorize Mike and I to proceed with formal closing procedures with Keystone Property Group. And a big thank you to the individuals that worked so tirelessly to get us to this point.
Thank you, Steph. That is amazing. The motion this evening for council, if so inclined, is to authorize the borough solicitor and borough manager to draft and execute closing documents with Keystone Property Group to effectuate the process of buying out the company's lease interest in the Borough Hall property.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Have at it.
I know.
Long time coming.
Long time coming is right.
One more thing off the shoulders. Okay, the next item on the agenda is manager matters. I will turn this over to Ms. Checo.
Thank you. Just like we spoke about, that the road program is happening. Your 2023 liquid fuels road program has been completed, and it was a huge success. So we are recommending the final payment certification for the 2023 liquid fuels program in the amount of $10,386.29.
So the motion this evening is to approve payment certificate number 4, the final, for the 2023 liquid fuels program in the amount of $10,386.29.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
The next item is an LSA grant application submission request. Chief Lennon is working in collaboration with Ms. Stetler to apply for a grant in excess of $70,000 that would be utilized specifically for a police hybrid vehicle. The application is required now. It does not require any matching funds. In terms of timeline, we basically would, decisions are not made really until the fall of 2024. So this would be, we're asking permission to submit the application, but it really would be applicable to your 2025 budget. So for this evening is the resolution so that we can actually submit for the grant.
Okay. So the motion this evening for council is to approve Resolution 2023-24, authorizing the submission of the LSA grant application for the purchase and uplift of a police vehicle in the amount of $70,134.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
We have a professional services escrow release for the Sarah R. Nevy 2015 Riverfront property. This is ready to be released and has been requested by the property owner.
Okay, thank you, Steph. So the motion for council, if so inclined this evening, is to approve an escrow release for the professional services in the amount of $4,257.49 plus interest for the Sarah Nevy 2015 Riverfront Property Trust.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Steph, could I clarify that? Is that for the Matson Mill section of 101 Washington? Okay.
It is for
The Matson Mill.
trust, oh, yes.
Right, okay.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item is under Department Matters. It's consider approving tuition reimbursement for Detective Matthew Bond's completed fall 2023 course. So the motion this evening, if council is so inclined, is to approve a tuition reimbursement for Detective Matthew Bond per the police collective bargaining agreement.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item is under legal matters. It's consider approving a court-stipulated tax assessment decrease for the property located at 2 Ash Street. We'll turn this over to Mr. Peters for a moment to clarify.
Thank you, President Leonard. This is an appeal, a tax assessment appeal that's been hanging out there since 2021. There was a court-mandated settlement conference where the parties reached a potential settlement subject to your approval and also the approval of the other taxing bodies. That assessment would be for year 2022, taking the assessment from $8.2 million to $7.7 million. For 2023, taking the assessment from $8.2 million to $7.25 million, and then moving forward to place the assessment at $6.9 million. That does mean, just given the delay in settling the case, that there was an overage, which means the borough would reimburse the property owner for 2022, the amount of $2,250, and for 2023, the amount of $4,169.59. Again, the settlement was part of a court-mandated settlement conference. The court encouraged a settlement, and based on those two numbers, the $2,000, $4,000, $6,000 total, we couldn't try the case for that much. And if there is, in the future, a turnaround in the market such that the value of that property goes back up, we certainly could challenge it with the district at that time. It's for 2 Ash, which I think is 3 Tower Bridge is the property we're talking about.
Anybody have any questions on that?
What parameters do they use to justify decreasing assessments? Because that's a little worrisome.
It's based on, in order to decrease an assessment, you need to have an appraiser that's willing to give a decreased assessment to prove the decreased assessment. So it's based on appraisals.
So do we do an assessment?
The borough usually does not carry the laboring or in these appeals because the school district gets so much more in taxes than you do. So for you to get an appraisal or to have paid for an appraisal here, it would have cost the amount that you're giving up. So most of the time, it's a really good question. Most of the time, the party that has the interest in fighting these is the school district.
But they don't fight them.
They do.
They do.
They do.
I think to clarify your question is that when cases come along that aren't court stipulated, the borough expresses its interest. We're there. We're represented at the county assessment board hearing, and we're making our stance very clear. I think the last one that we were at, we made it very clear that the borough, not only the borough, but the school board and the county all has a stake in decisions of the assessment board to decrease those taxes.
Right.
There's an effect on all parties that are involved, and I think you're going to see this more, but we are tracking the market. And so regardless of decisions, arbitrary or not, that the Board of Assessment makes, those cases that we feel are important enough to fight, we will in Commonwealth Court. We will appeal them. And those that we may or may not lose based off of a decision by either a judge, a court, the assessment hearing, we will take back in front of them once the market shifts.
And this one, just keep in mind, this one, the borough and the school district won. This is an appeal by the property owner. So we actually won before the Board of Assessment, and then it went up on appeal.
To the court.
Okay.
And this is a Tower Bridge site.
Yeah, I think it's 3 Tower Bridge, Tina.
Hey. Oh.
So the owner of that property has multiple properties. So do we anticipate that that same logic would be used for
Yes.
other of his properties?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think the goal, Tina, would be, now that the borough is as involved in these as it is, to make sure, I mean, this sitting around for 2 years is a problem. So to the extent we're more involved, that there is another property owner by that property owner that we're very involved in.
Because for me, this is something that affects all our residents. This is income that the borough loses because a property owner goes to a Board of Appeals and says, I have this done and it's worth $3 million less now. And we lose. The residents lose. So it is something that I know that you are tracking and that we need to keep track of.
We will make sure we keep track of it.
Okay.
We understand it's important. It just presented a budget and what those property taxes mean to a resident and to the borough. And
I
so
know.
we understand how pivotal it is, and it's on our radar. And I was there,
I know.
and Mike's firm was there, and will continue to be there.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, they come in with all the promises years ago about what they will do for the borough, and then
So this is not everyone. There are requests for decrease in assessments where if you actually review the assessment and the appraisal that is done, you can understand where they're coming from, especially in today's market. There are the outliers of those that we have a problem with.
Right.
And the outliers are the ones where our presence, requested by our elected officials on behalf of their residents, are the ones that we are monitoring, tracking, appealing, and making sure they understand the burden that it does place on the borough, whether they want to see it that way or not.
Okay. Well, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, so the motion this evening is to approve court-stipulated tax assessment decrease, which requires the borough to provide a tax refund for the 2022 and 2023 tax years for the property located at 2 Ash Street.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? All opposed?
aye.
Okay, so we have 5 ayes and 1 decline.
Nay.
Nay. Not used to that one. Nay. We have a nay. Okay, so Mayor Aronson, what do you have this evening for us?
Thank you, President Leonard. So we had the EAC's cleanup over the weekend, and Thomas's first cleanup. It was great for a cold, windy day. Really great turnout. Generally, the fall is focused in on the west side, and the spring is on the east side. So thank you to our EAC members and to all the volunteers that came out. A lot of Boy Scouts, our cheerleading crew on Caldwell was there. So it was great to see everyone out again for a cleanup. We also had a fire alarm giveaway right here in our EOC. So these happen a couple times a year, and it's run by our fire department, and you'll see a couple of them installed in our house. So thank you to Shauna, who was there, to everyone who makes these events happen. And then finally, we had our Halloween parade, which was awesome. I feel like they just get bigger and bigger every time we do it. Great costumes, adorable little dogs, great food, great volunteers, and of course our residents showed up in force. So thank you to our team for putting this on every year. It's always a big success. That's it for me.
Thank you, Mayor Aronson. Stacy, do you have anything?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Kathleen?
Yeah, well, Tim's already gone, but I already thanked him and Thomas too for the cleanup. And one thing was very impressive, because I took place in it, was how clean the west side of town really is, and the drains were really clean. The last time I did one, all the drains were filled with debris, and but they were very clean this time.
So I'm going to have Ms. Checo tell you why are those drains clean now?
Well, our public services team has been, devoting attention to stormwater management, and you're already seeing the effects of decisions that you've made in that area of operation. So thank you for bringing it up.
Well, the people I was with, we all noticed it. It was,
That's great.
yeah.
I think they
It's
go
different.
out every month and
Yeah.
clean the storm sewer drains, yes.
But that's all I have. Thank you.
Nothing today.
Nothing? Karen?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay. Is there any public comment this evening?
I can't help myself.
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I can't help. Sorry, I'll wait until I'm up here to speak. So I was lucky enough to listen to the Main Street overlay presentation, and I applied to be on the task force. I went to most of the meetings. I think I had to miss one, so I was away. It was a really great group, echoing what Tina and Judy and others have said. Lively discussions, and I think the goal and where we're going, it's all great. There are a couple things that I would just suggest as a resident. As we were talking about climate change, and I'm sure we all know that we are in a housing crunch, and there's a great demand to live in places like Conshohocken, right? And that's to your credit. We have a great community here. So I am up here to say, mainly, let's look for ways to use this overlay to encourage additional residents to come in, and that's what we're doing. I would go a little further, and I think there was a lot of attention to the height and the stories. One of the things that I found perplexing, and not meaning to be negative, but the lower zone is actually a lower height than the upper avenues, which just didn't make sense with the conversation that we had. And the other thing that I'll say is, with the parking, and I know, I can only imagine with each of you as borough council members, what kind of conversations you all have about parking issues in the borough. Lots of parking are not conducive to walkable neighborhoods. If we want people to walk, we can't say, here's a bunch of free parking. And that's just the reality. We had some good conversations about bike infrastructure and things like that. And a lot of that would come in a different conversation about Fayette Street, the right-of-way, right? But I would, those are my kind of pieces of feedback. Again, it was a great group, and I wholly agree with the effort that we're doing. Just couldn't help myself.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Why didn't you speak up while we were doing it?
I think I did a few times.
But
I
not
think
about the height.
I think I missed that meeting.
Okay.
So I didn't want to derail things too much, like I am right now.
Yeah, you're not derailing. That's what work sessions are for.
Yep.
Work
That's it.
sessions are to have these conversations so that before we decide on voting for something, we can work with the lawyers to make those adjustments to the ordinance as written. So I appreciate the feedback.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well,
Good evening, everybody. I'll try to be quick here. I sent out an email to, I think, all of you. I hope I copied everybody about Veterans Day 2023. They'll be coming up next Saturday. We were doing West Conshohocken at 10:30 in the morning, and then at 11:11 we'll be at 5th and Wells doing that monument. We invite everyone from Borough Council to come out. You can come speak, lay the wreath. We always encourage that, and we appreciate you guys coming out. The second thing was about the Hometown Hero banners. So we're going, this is our second year of Hometown Hero banners. Originally, it was the 3 that we put around 5th and Wells. We added 15 in 2022, and then you guys did a great job and added, 32 more. I think we're up to 50 now in the borough. The questions I get a lot of, the one question is the original 3 that we put up, will we as the VFW still be able to control those and determine what 3 we put up there? The only reason we asked is we put a current member, a past member, and an auxiliary member when we first piloted the program. If that's not going to be the case, it's fine. If it is, we just want to be able to prepare and know what 3 we're going to nominate for that to happen. And then the second thing is, so 18 will be coming down this year, not to be put back up after next Memorial Day. If that's the number, it's fine. But those are the questions I get around the post, is how many more Hometown Hero banners are going up? Are they going to add more next year? Are they going to put them on Conwell Road? I get all these, things that come in. And the more informed I am, the more informed I can make them and help, hopefully, the process. It's been a very, I think, successful program in the 3 years we've had it.
isn't the how long they're up part of the program?
Yeah, they're up for 2 years.
Okay.
So that's why the original 3 and the original 15 from 2022 will not go back up in 2024.
Right.
So there could be 18 new put up for 2024.
And you have people waiting to put up banners?
Last time I talked to Janice, she had a wait list.
Did either one of you talk to her to see what the wait list was?
I talked to her about a month ago, and she was telling me that there was a wait list, and I was, I called her today. I didn't get in touch with her, but I did call her before this meeting today. So she's had to return checks because people will send in the application with the checks, and then she can't print the banners because we didn't have enough spaces, so she sends them back. But she keeps their names on a wait list to call them to say, hey, now's your turn to resubmit your check, because she doesn't want to cash them until she knows she can print them up.
Right.
So we're up to 50?
50 total in the borough, yes. And so 18 would go up next year. The 32 that went up here for 2023 would go up again for 2024.
So 18 new ones.
Yeah, but if You allow us.
Replacement, 18 replacement.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. If you allow the VFW to have our 3, it's really only 15. So that's, that's kind of the
Right,
number we're
right.
looking at.
So you asked a bunch of questions and we did respond to you on, it was October 12th.
I didn't even see that email.
Well, I'm looking at it.
Okay.
So there's 50 banners currently, 20 of which are slated to retire this year, according to our records and Ann's records of the Hometown Heroes. The installation of each banner is coordinated between the Public Services Department and the Borough Electrician. We're happy to communicate any requests. That's what we sent to you. So if there's 3 specific banners that you want at a specific location, you just have to let us know which ones.
Okay.
According to the records directly from Hometown Heroes, again, we have 50, 30 of them were newly purchased last year. That opens up 20 for this year. Right now, we have 18 applications.
Okay.
So there is no wait list. We have 18, 2 more come in, they'll go up. And then, yes, you asked about retiring banners. They will always be returned to the purchasing member.
Okay.
We get the actual contact information on the order form when
Yep.
the banner is actually delivered to us. So we'll handle that with Hometown Heroes to just make sure that gets, to the rightful owner.
Outstanding. I'm sorry I didn't see that. I don't know if it went to my spam or whatever, but I just wanted to address it as here. And then the final thing I want to talk about was November 3rd, we do holiday cards for troops. Some of you definitely have been there before. We want to invite all Borough Council to come out. It's a Thursday. It's a Thursday after Thanksgiving, I believe, and it's usually we have the Scouts there. We have the all the members of the community come out.
December 3rd.
December
No,
3rd.
November 30th.
November 30th.
Yeah,
Okay.
November 30th. It's a Thursday. We accept any donations to send over, and then it's mostly the cards. That's what they really enjoy getting as well. And then on a personal note, I just accepted a position with Madeline Dean. I'm now her case manager for veterans and service members.
Congratulations.
Today was my first day. I grew a lot in the VFW, learning about the veteran space, and now I'm doing it for the congressional district. So it's pretty exciting.
It's a great
looking forward
honor.
to it.
That's great.
So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more public comment?
Anybody? Anybody at all?
Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.